There she is, the sister no one would have, the bride's friend said, not troubling to lower her voice, and the laughter that followed reached every corner of the wedding breakfast. From the far side of the crowded ballroom, the Duke of Davencourt saw the young woman it was aimed at go still. She stood alone beside a pillar, a little apart from the glittering throng, in a gown that had been carefully made over more than once and a string of modest pearls, and she did not flinch or flush or flee. She simply lowered her eyes a moment, gathered herself and lifted them again, and Ivo, watching from across the room, felt something turn over in his chest that had been still a very long time. He knew who she was, Wilhelmina Cobb, the elder sister of the morning's bridegroom, the plain one, the clever one, the one the family spoke of with a sigh. 28 and unmarried, kept at home to manage a difficult mother and a careless household, brought out today only because a brother's wedding could not decently exclude her. Her own younger sister had married 2 seasons past. The bridegroom, her brother, had been settled with a fortune. And Wilhelmina had been left to stand by the pillar and be pointed at. Ivo had come to the wedding out of obligation, the family being old friends of his late father's, and he had meant to stay an hour and slip away. He was not a man for crowds. He guarded himself behind a coldness that society took for arrogance, and that was in truth only a deep dislike of being known. But he had been watching Wilhelmina Cobb for the better part of that hour, the dry, quick way she answered when anyone troubled to address her, the kindness with which she steadied an elderly aunt, the loneliness she carried so well that almost no one saw it, and now, as the laughter swelled and the bride's friends gathered to enjoy the sport of her, he found he could not stand idle. The mockery was building. Someone called across to ask whether Miss Cobb meant to catch the bride's flowers, since it was clearly her last hope. The matrons tittered behind their fans. The bridegroom, her own brother, laughed along rather than defend her, which was the cruelest stroke of all. Wilhelmina stood at the heart of it with her chin up and her hands folded, alone, abandoned by the very people who should have stood beside her, and Ivo saw the bright shine come into her eyes that meant she would not weep here, would not give them that, but was very near the end of her strength. He crossed the room. He did it without hurry, the Duke of Davencourt, and the crowd parted for him as crowds did, the latter faltering as the most powerful man in the room walked through it. He came to the pillar where Wilhelmina stood, and the watching faces turned to see what he could possibly want there, and he saw the confusion in her own eyes. She did not know him, had no notion why a duke should approach the family disgrace. He stopped close beside her, his back half to the room, and bent his head as though to murmur some private gallantry, and under the cover of it he said, very low, so that only she could hear, "Pretend you are mine, just for this hour. Take my arm and let them choke on it." Her eyes flew to his. For a heartbeat she only stared, and he thought she might refuse, might be too proud or too startled to play. Then something kindled in her face, not gratitude, which he would not have wanted, but a swift, fierce understanding, and beneath it the faintest spark of mischief. And why, she breathed back, should the Duke of Davencourt trouble himself with the sister no one would have? Because, he said, offering his arm in full view of the room, his voice rising now to carry, "I find the company by this pillar a great deal finer than any other in the room. Miss Cobb, will you do me the honor?" The ballroom went silent. Wilhelmina laid her hand upon his sleeve. He felt it tremble and then steady. And the Duke of Davencourt led the mocked and abandoned sister out into the middle of the floor, before the bride and the bridegroom and the tittering matrons, and the friend who had named her the sister no one would have, and the murmur that ran through the gathered elite was no longer laughter, but astonishment. "They are all looking at us," Wilhelmina said through a fixed and brilliant smile. "Let them," said Ivo, "smile at me as though I have said something charming. They will spend a fortnight wondering what it was." She laughed, a real laugh, surprised out of her, and the sound of it did something to him that he had not expected and could not name. Tell me something true, he said, as he turned her down the floor. Not the brittle thing you give them. A true thing. We are to be conspirators, you and I. I should know my fellow plotter. She considered him a moment, as though deciding whether the question was a trap. Then lightly, a true thing. Very well. I am not nearly so meek as I let them believe. I bear it because there is no profit in fighting, not because I do not mind. I mind a very great deal. Her chin lifted. There. You may report me to the family as ungrateful and unbecoming, if you like. They will not be surprised. I should sooner report them, Ivo said, for being blind. And he meant it so plainly that the brilliant smile slipped from her face and left something startled and unguarded in its place, which he found, to his own quiet astonishment, that he liked far better than the smile. He stayed at her side the whole of the breakfast. He brought her wine and a plate from the long table, and stood by her, and bent to hear what she said as though her every word were of consequence, which the watching room read exactly as he intended it to be read. He found, as the hour went on, that he was no longer playing a part. The things she said were of consequence. She had a dry, quick wit that she had clearly spent years learning to keep behind her teeth, and a way of seeing through the people in that room, the preening bride, the self-satisfied matrons, that was merciless and exactly fair. He had spent his guarded life among people who bored him. He was not bored now. He had not been bored, he realized, since the moment he crossed the floor. The bride's friend, who had named her so cruelly, came simpering to be introduced, and was met by the Duke with a coldness that froze the simper on her lips. The brother who had laughed found, suddenly, that he could not get near his own Duke, and Wilhelmina Cobb, who an hour before had been the object of the room's contempt, was by the breakfast's end its most envied woman. It was meant to last an hour. The hour passed, and Ivo did not leave. They had gone out together onto a stone terrace where the noise of the party thinned and the evening air was cool, and there, away from the watching eyes, the brilliant defensive smile fell from Wilhelmina's face and left it tired and honest and unguarded. You may go now, Your Grace, she said quietly. You have done a great kindness, and I shall remember it all my life. But the play is over, and you need not keep it up where no one can see. Ivo looked at her in the dusk. The candlelight from the windows fell soft on the lace at her collar, and the modest pearls at her throat, and on the face he had been watching all evening, clever and wary, and, now the armor was down, lovely in a quiet way the room had been too foolish to see. What if I do not wish the play to be over? He said. She went still. Do not, she said, and there was no anger in it, only a deep weariness. Do not be kind to me beyond the hour, Your Grace. I am too old and too plain to be teased with hopes. I have had a lifetime of being the thing men are gallant about and then forget. I would rather you simply left. I have never in my life been gallant about anything, Ivo said. Ask anyone in that room. They will tell you I am cold and proud, and that I do not trouble myself for people. They are right. I crossed that floor for you because I could not make myself not cross it, and I have stayed because every hour beside you has been better than the last, and I am standing on this terrace now telling you the plain truth, which I do for no one. He stepped closer. I asked you to pretend you were mine because it was the only way I could think to stand beside you without explaining a thing I did not yet understand. I understand it now. I do not want you to pretend any longer, Miss Cobb. I want it to be true. She stared at him, and the bright shine came back into her eyes, but it was changed now, wholly changed. You cannot mean it, she whispered. I am the Duke of Davencourt, he said with the ghost of a smile. I am not famed for saying things I do not mean. I have meant every word I have spoken to you since I crossed that floor, and I will go on meaning them for as long as you will let me. They called you the sister no one would have. His voice roughened. They were blind. I would have you, Wilhelmina. I have wanted nothing so much in years. The party murmured on behind the lit windows. Somewhere within, the bride was being toasted, and the matrons were already spinning the evening's great mystery, what the cold Duke of Davencourt could possibly want with the plain Cobb's sister. But on the terrace, in the cool dusk, Wilhelmina Cobb looked up at the man who had crossed a ballroom for her, and for the first time in her life she let herself believe that she might be chosen, not pitied, wanted, not endured. "Then I am yours," she said very low, "not for an hour, for as long as you will have me, Ivo. I have hidden how much I wish to be wanted for so long that I had forgotten the wishing was still there. You have reminded me of it tonight, and I find I cannot put it away again." He raised her hand and pressed it to his lips, there in the candlelight from the windows, and felt the whole guarded coldness of his life crack open and let in something warm. He called at her family's house the very next morning, not in secret, not with the careful distance of a man hedging his pride, but openly, in his own crested carriage, and asked to speak with her father, and made his intentions plain. The household was thrown into a confusion that would have been comical had it not also been, to Wilhelmina, a kind of vindication years in the earning. The mother who had kept her at home to fetch and carry now wept and clung, and called her her dearest girl. The brother who had laughed at the wedding stammered out a congratulation he plainly did not understand. And Wilhelmina, who had borne their carelessness in silence for 28 years, accepted it all with a serene grace that told Ivo, watching from the doorway, exactly how strong she had had to be to survive that house at all. He honored her the more for it. He had thought, crossing the ballroom, that he was doing a kindness. He understood now that he had stumbled by the purest good fortune into the great good of his life. He courted her properly through the months that followed, drives in the park where she need no longer be the sister left at home, books he chose because they would make her laugh, long quiet conversations in which he told her, by degrees, the guarded truths of his own heart that he had never told a living soul. She listened as no one ever had. She teased him out of his coldness as no one had dared, and the more of himself he gave her, the more certain he grew that the woman the world had named unwanted was the only woman he had ever truly wanted at all. They were married in the autumn, and the wedding was a far quieter, far happier thing than the one at which they had met. The bride's friend who had mocked her was not invited. The brother who had laughed came humbled and apologetic and was forgiven, for Wilhelmina had a generous heart and could afford generosity now. And the great cold Duke of Davencourt, who had been a stranger to warmth all his life, was seen to smile so often in the company of his Duchess that society scarcely knew him. "You whispered 4 words to me by a pillar," Wilhelmina said to him once, on a winter evening long after, the two of them by their own fire. "Pretend you are mine. I have thought sometimes that no one in the world was ever rescued by 4 kinder words." "They were not the kindness," Ivo said, drawing her close. "You were. I only had the wit for once in my guarded life to see it before someone else did." He kissed the top of her head. "I never wanted you to pretend, Wilhelmina, not for a single hour. I wanted you to be mine, truly and always, and so you are, and so you shall be, the most cherished woman in any room I ever enter, for all the rest of my days." And Wilhelmina Cobb, who had once stood alone by a pillar and been named the sister no one would have, leaned her head against the shoulder of the Duke, who would have her above all the world, and was, at the last, exactly as wanted as she had always longed to be.